Hey everybody. So now that we have an inventory manager that can collect inventory items from pickups, or maybe you've already typed them in, or however you want to add those inventory items to the manager, doesn't matter. We can present those items through a screen. So how are we going to do that? We're going to make a little UI, and it's just going to have a grid of items. I don't know. Could be fun. So let's pop over to this inventory screen here, and or this play screen. This is our play panel in the game in Jumpy Cube, and I'm going to add a new button, and I'm going to call it button underscore inventory, and instead of options it's going to say inventory. And I'm going to move it to the left-hand side. So instead of being at, where do I have this object? Instead of being in the bottom right, he's going to be in the bottom left, because that's the kind of guy I am. Instead of being an anchor of a pivot of his far right side, it's going to be his far left side. Boom. And just like the other side, I'm going to put it out another 20 units. And now I have an inventory button on one side, which is way over. So do I have a best fit? I'm gonna, looks like it's hitting the edge a bit, so I'm gonna make it I'm gonna make it point. I'm deciding if I want to do pixel based or otherwise. I'll make it 10 pixels, 10 pixels, boom. So now I don't have it touching the edges. That feels a bit better. Probably want to do the same thing with that, but it doesn't matter at the moment. I got my inventory button. I could color it something different if I wanted. But here we go. When inventory button is pressed, I'm going to want it to open the, not the options panel, but I'm going to want it to open an inventory panel. So we need to create an inventory panel. How do we do that? We go in here on our menu controller canvas in our prefab, and I'm going to create empty. I'm going to name it inventory panel. It is going to be of type menu panel, like what the other objects have. So I'm going to my inventory panel here, and I'm going to type in panel. There it is. Now he's also a panel. I'm going to turn him off to start. And in play panel, when the button inventory is hit, the play panel will close. That's still true. And the open panel, instead of being the options, will be inventory panel. Boom. And maybe I still want it to pause when I open it. That should be fine. So now that we have an options panel, let me just turn it on so I can see it. Oops, not options. I am a liar. I meant to say inventory panel. Now that we have this inventory panel, I want to make sure that it takes up the full screen. So boom, I held Alt and Shift and clicked there. The other option you have is just clicking there and typing 0 into whatever these entries become. And then I'm going to add, just so I see something, a UI image. Boom. So let's just see how this goes. I turned it off. Oop, I turned off the inventory panel again. I'm going to press play. And when I press the inventory button, I should see that white square because that's what I added. Perfect. Okay. So I actually wanted to be pretty similar to my other screen. So I might just duplicate it. I'm tempted. Control C. I'm clicking on the image because when you paste at that level. Boom. Okay, that's fine. And instead of the button region having this stuff, I'm going to delete that. I'll add a button, so I duplicated it, so this button close is going to be saying close the options panel, which is not true. So I'm going to fix that. I'm going to say, okay, my inventory panel, instead of trying to close the options panel, close the inventory panel. Boom. And if you don't have these panels in your scene, then, you know, make your own panel, make sure you like it. I just wanted that little X button, and I wanted the foreground and all that stuff. So now I should be able to just turn this off and press play. And now my inventory panel should open when I hit that. I go back to my main scene here. Menu controller, boom. Inventory panel is open, and I hit close, and it's back to play panel. Cool. Perfect, that's all I wanted. That's all I ever wanted. So now that I'm here, when inventory panel opens, I want to be able to load in a bunch of inventory items and have them displayed in a list right here. So how do we make that list? I think I would have inside of my panel, I'll create empty and I'll call it, whoops, excuse me, undo. I'm going to right click panel, create empty, and say inventory region. I'm going to make it take up, I don't know, the most of it. So let's do 0.2 to 0.8. Excuse me, 0.8 on the X, yep. And from on the Y, maybe like from 0.21 to 0.9, 0.85. That feels good. And then I'll zero out all this stuff. And now it takes up that region there that you can see. I might even add a label so that you know where you are, because that's probably good to know. So I'm adding a text field inside of my FG panel. And since I already know that the dimensions of this, I'll have it go from I think I said 2, yep, 0.2 to 0.8. And the Y, I know I ended the other Y at 0.85, so this one I'll start at 0.9 and go to 0.98-ish. That feels good. Or maybe 1. Zero it all out. And so now my text region can be up there. I'll center the text, I'll lower it so that it's bottom aligned. Let me see how that button close is set up. Oh, from 0.85 to 1. Or excuse me, from... Okay, so I have it sized at 56 pixels with a -10. So maybe I have this hug the top like this. Have them both be at the 1, 1 point. 56 pixels. I have its Y pivot be at the top of it. And I think it was negative 10. I think it was negative 10 pixels. What's going on? Negative 10. And now that should be the same size as the X, so it'll feel good. They'll be aligned, it'll feel nice. And now I say best fit, boom. And now it should kind of feel like one is aligned with the other. And I remember there's like a weird checkbox I can have that said alignment by geometry. Does that? See how it aligns it to the actual bottom of the square. So now these look in line. That feels nice, feels good. Mwah. So I'll say inventory. Boom. And it's aligning that bottom Y there with here, which I'm not sure I like, but that's fine. Now I'll close my inventory panel. I just want to make sure it still looks okay when I press play. Inventory. Perfect. And that could look however you want it to look. Doesn't matter. Boom. So now I have my inventory panel. He has his menu panel, which we're going to change in a little bit. we're going to have, let me think about this. In the inventory region, I should not be in play mode. In the inventory region, just drink some tea. I want a grid of items. How do you make a grid, Justin? That's easy. Let's add a component called grid. Layout group. I actually don't know what grid is. That might be new. I wish they told me what. Let me read this. So normally, I'd use grid layout group. I don't know what grid is. I'm not going to use it. I think that might be for 3D objects. I'm going to do grid layout group. And whenever I add an object in here, so create UI image, boom. This is one of our items. Let me, so an inventory region will be a grid that contains a series of items. I'm going to create an empty element in there and call it inventory item slot, because that's what it'll be. And I'm going to put an image inside of that slot just to make it visible, or maybe a button. I'm thinking a button. Let's do a button. Boom. Inventory image or item. And I think I usually use btn underscore, right? And I'll make sure that it takes up its, I'm going to use the blue corner thing down here. So I'm just going to tap that and then zero out the top. Boom. And this inventory slot, it doesn't have a size on its own because the button region is what sizes it. So I want it to be, maybe each grid inventory item is 50 by 50 pixels. I don't know. It's whatever works for you. 100 by 100. And if I were to have multiple of them, I'll duplicate. Boom, 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 boom. I want these items in my inventory region to be, I'm just reading here, I do middle center. Let's do upper center. That should, yep, make it like that. And then you could say, I want there to be a specific amount of columns and a specific amount of rows or whatever it is you want. But as it stands, I only need to do that. I would like there to be, let's see what happens if I do like 20 and 20. That feels a little better. So let's just say I had a bunch of items and they are laid out like that. I actually need to make a new menu panel script because this is a special kind of menu panel that needs to know when to load in inventory items. So I'm going to create a new folder in my UI folder, and I'm going to call it panels because there's different kind of panels. And I'm going to make an inventory folder in there, inventory. And inventory is going to have 2 items in it. It's going to have a script to represent the panel, so inventory panel. And then it's going to have a script to represent the inventory slot items. So each of those buttons is going to be its own script. Inventory panel slot. Or maybe just inventory UI slot. And that way, you know it's part of the UI. It's not a part of like the more generic inventory system. Every inventory slot, I just opened up this inventory UI slot. It's going to know that it's a button, so I need to say using Unity engine.ui public button inventory button. It needs to know what its button is. Maybe it turns it on and off. Public text inventory text. It needs to know what its text slot is, so it could like take its name and like Sword of Damocles and put it inside the button in that like little text field inside the button. And it needs to know what its inventory item is. So public inventory item, inventory item. I'm just going to name it that so it's easier to see. that item, since it is its own class that we made up, I need to mention that it's serializable or serialized field. The other two are made by Unity, so we don't need to do that. They're both mono behaviors already. So now each of these buttons, I'll delete all but one because we're happy with it, would be of type inventory UI slot. Boom. And they would have their own stats and item name and all that. But as it stands, it just needs to know what's my text field. This will get filled in on the fly when it's created. But the buttons will be static. They're always going to be the same. So this is my button, and this is my text. Boom. Let's go to my prefabs folder. I'm going to create a folder and call it my prefabs and my UI. Create folder inventory. And inside of here, I'm going to save this inventory slot because the UI for my inventory panel, my grid, is going to need to generate however many items you have. I don't know how many items you're going to have. The other option we have is always having like empty slots. So you could assign them on the fly, but I like this way more. We could totally talk about whatever it is you want to do, but now I don't need that inventory slot item anymore, that slot inside the grid, because that's going to get made on the fly. Inventory panel, we need to apply this new script to inventory panel. And first, I need to mention that inventory panel, instead of being a mono behavior, is going to be of type UI panel, what I call it, menu panel. Because I'm going to right click and go to definition. A menu panel is already a mono behavior, and it has all those nice menu panel behaviors that we want to use. Except the inventory panel is going to be different in that it can create its inventory slots. So I'm going to, instead of menu panel, it's going to be an inventory panel. I'll remove this old reference, get out of here. And I need to fix any of the buttons that used to reference it. So I'm going to click on button close here. And instead of that missing object, I'm going to drag this inventory panel back in and say, okay, this is the new panel you're closing. And that's because I got rid of the old script that was there, the old menu panel, and I made a new version of menu panel called inventory panel. And the same needs to happen with button inventory. Instead of opening this missing object, it needs to open inventory panel, open panel, boom. So now everything should still work. And inventory panel, he's just gonna have a few more things. He's gonna override. I need to do something when, where's my menu panel? Menu panel. Boom. So I want to be able to do something when open panel is called. So let's do public void open panel. I don't believe I can do that. Let's find out. Inventory panel hides the inherited menu. So it hides, it overrides the method of its parent. But what if I want to be able to run both? Because an inventory panel is a type of menu panel. And the way you make this work is I say virtual, a keyword virtual. That means any type of menu panel, whether it's an inventory panel or otherwise, can use this method within itself. And by using it, it can override it and do something new. Whenever I'm opened, I want to load up my inventory screen of all my grid elements of my inventory items. So when I open, not only am I going to run my original method Open panel. I'm also going to do some new stuff. I need to reference public game object inventory slot prefab. I need to know what my prefab is. So if I go back to here, I need to fill this slot in with my prefab in my inventory. Boom. Boop. And now I need my inventory screen to be able to load in a bunch of inventory based on the inventory manager's knowledge of its own inventory. So there's a couple steps. I need to be able to add things to a particular, I'll say game object, to a particular object, which is this grid. I need to know what this grid is, what this grid object is here, the object that has the grid layout group in it, so that I can add items inside of it. That's step one. So I know what my grid container is. Step two, I need to know where my grid manager is. So let's write this out. This is called pseudocode. Find grid manager, get grid manager's current inventory, create for every inventory item, spawn a new inventory slot button, add button to my inventory grid. And before that, I need to delete any old inventory slot buttons from my grid, so that when you reopen your menu, you don't get like more and more buttons over and over again. You don't get like a weird duplicate thing. So, first step, delete any old inventory slots. There wouldn't be any to start, but I'll say for each transform actually, I think I can just write inventory grid container dot children child transform dot child. Yeah, see, so the transform, which is the it's like location and space, does know all of its children. So I'm going to say child count. I want to kill all my children. Geez, that's a dark thing to say. Int child count equals that. For int I equals 0, I is less than my child count, I plus plus. I'm looping through all my children. I'm going to destroy every one of them. Inventory grid container dot transform dot child. I believe it's going to be get child, and it's going to want the index, which is I. Is this a game object? No, it's a transform. So I need to say transform current child equals that, and now I'm going to destroy it. Destroy current child dot game object. So get rid of it. If it was there, get rid of it. Now that I've cleared out whatever used to be there, I can refresh it with some new values. So I need to find my game manager, just like what we did before, where I say inventory manager, excuse me. That should say inventory manager. Inventory manager IM equals game object dot find object of type inventory manager. So look for the inventory manager. If IM is not equal to null, this is just like when you picked up an item. now I can do something. I can do all this stuff. So if I have an inventory manager, then I can try to do all this fancy stuff. Get the grid manager's current inventory. So im.items list, inventory list. There it is. So inventory list is my list of items. For each, I need to do for every inventory item. So for each inventory item, or I can name it anything I want. I'm going to name it current item in my inventory list. Inside now, I'm going through every item inside of my inventory list, and I need to spawn a new button and add it in. So game object G, or new button, or new slot button, equals instantiate. I'm creating a new one using this prefab up here. So instantiate another version of that prefab. Oops. And I meant to do a parentheses, sorry, not a bracket. And set its parent to this inventory grid container. So now, regardless of how many buttons I have, I'm going to add it to there. And I also want to be able to tell that button whose item it is. So let's go to inventory UI slot, and let's say public void assign inventory item. And it'll just take in an inventory item. I just gave it a name called item. So I can say when I'm assigned an inventory item, I will say inventory item equals new item. I'm going to change this to being new item. And if my inventory text is not equal to null, so if we remember to assign it, then inventory text dot text equals, we're setting the text field to being inventory item dot name, right? A dot item name. So now it'll say what it is when we load our screen. In here, in our inventory panel, when it spawned all of its or created all of its buttons, for each button that it makes, it now needs to assign that grid slot's button an inventory item. So I'm going through all the inventory of my items in the manager, and for each one of those inventory items, I'm creating a button, and I'm putting that inventory item into the button, and then I'm going to the next one. Boop. Going to the next one, create, boop. Going to the next one, create, boop. So that's all this is doing. Creating an inventory button for every inventory item I have, and tying them together, saying you are this inventory item. So slot button dot get component, and I expect it to have inventory item UI slot, or inventory UI slot. Get that, get this class attached to your UI slot, because let's go over here. This prefab we have has that script on it. That's why I'm getting this component. Where'd it go? Oh, whoops. There it is. Because I'm getting that script. I'm going to save it as a variable. Current slot equals. So current UI slot equals this. I can say if current UI slot is not equal to null, that means that we have remembered to attach that script to our prefab. Current UI slot dot assign inventory item, because we just made that script over here, assign inventory item, and we made it public so we can reference it over here. What item should I assign it? I want to give it the current item. Boom. And now I believe we're done. That easy. I'm going to turn off my inventory panel. Boom. And now it's just the play panel. I jump up and down, I'm going to hit inventory, and it's empty, which is expected because we didn't collect any items yet. I collect one item, inventory. I now have I can't even read it. I believe it says cool ball. Now I'm going to go over here. Boom. Inventory. Cool ball and less cool ball. Now I'm going to hit spacebar a few times because I know that sets up some collection. Now I have 8 items. And I have a bunch of Sword of Damocles now. The next steps you could do is making this a scroll region so that when I go over a certain grid count, I can still scroll through all my items and all that kind of thing. That's a different subject. Totally happy to talk about it. But this is where I'm going to stop for an initial super basic inventory. You could then have used those textures that I passed along and done something like in the script. Remember how every inventory item has a texture? That item texture, I could have said public image inventory icon equals, well, wouldn't be equal, you would slide it in. Inventory image. I could say inventory image dot texture dot sprite equals the other thing. And I forgot to set it to a sprite type, not a texture 2D. So let's go to that definition. This should be a sprite. If you wanted to have custom textures for every UI slot. Now that I've done that, I'll go back to my inventory item slot, and he needs to know what his image is. So let's open up this prefab, and I'll make it just the button itself is that image. That the image is, of course, the image component that's on it, and it has a sprite, and I just need to be able to set that sprite based on whatever my inventory item is. And so let's go back to here and go to the pickup item, and the item has this sprite here that we can assign. I'll make one an X, and I'll make, do I have the checkbox in here? I do. Might be hard to see. I'll make it the blue button. So now each of my pickup items have different textures on them. And when I press play and I collect them, boom and boom, and I hit my inventory, now they have their own custom icons. And that's how you would use those sprite values to inform what the inventory items should look like on the screen. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sticking with me for that, and I hope that you found it interesting and educational, and I'm always here if you have questions. Have a great day, everybody.